Imagine a silent desert night. The wind howls across the empty plains, carrying with it the whispers of a nation that once existed, but no longer does. No monuments remain, no songs are sung, and no prayers rise from its ashes. An entire empire wiped clean from the pages of history, but why? How can a powerful kingdom vanish so completely, leaving behind nothing but rumors and shadows? The answer lies in a single fatal mistake. A decision so reckless, so drenched in arrogance that it awakened the wrath of one man. A man whose name still shakes the world centuries later, Genghis Khan. He was not a ruler to forgive. He was not a man to forget. Those who disrespected him, even with a single word or gesture, sealed their fate. And this empire made the worst mistake of all. Picture this moment. Royal messengers arriving at the court of a proud king, delivering a simple request for trade and peace on behalf of Genghis Khan. But instead of hospitality, they are mocked. Instead of respect, they are humiliated. One is murdered, the other brutally scarred. The insult cuts deeper than any sword. It is not just an attack on men, but an attack on the honor of the Mongols, on the honor of Genghis Khan himself. From that single spark, fire spreads. A vengeance begins that will not rest until every stone of this kingdom is shattered. Every city reduced to dust, every man, woman, and child left to the mercy of the Mongol storm. Tonight, we uncover the truth of this forgotten empire, the kingdom that dared to mock the most feared conqueror in human history, and paid with its very existence. Are you ready to witness the fatal mistake that erased an entire empire? Long before their downfall, the Khwarazm Empire stretched across the heart of Central Asia. It was rich, powerful, and proud. Its cities shone with markets overflowing with silks, jewels, and spices. Scholars debated in grand halls. Merchants carried gold on the backs of camels, and kings sat on thrones believing their empire would last forever. The ruler of this mighty land was Shah Muhammad II. History remembers him as a man of ambition, brilliant at times, but dangerously arrogant. He inherited an empire at its peak, controlling the lands from Persia to the great deserts beyond. He believed he was untouchable, chosen by fate to rival the greatest rulers of his age. But beyond the horizon, far to the east, another power was rising. The Mongols, once dismissed as nomads of the steppe, had forged themselves into a storm under the leadership of one man, Genghis Khan. Unlike other rulers, Genghis had clawed his way to power from nothing. Betrayals, battles, starvation, and loss had shaped him. He trusted no one blindly, and he punished disrespect with fire and blood. For years, the Mongols swept across Asia, conquering kingdoms with terrifying speed. But unlike the image of mindless destroyers, Genghis Khan valued trade. He knew that wealth came not just from war, but from the steady flow of goods, merchants, and ideas. The Silk Road was the lifeline of his growing empire, and he needed allies who controlled its richest routes. That is why he looked westward, toward the Khwarazm Empire. Instead of attacking, he chose diplomacy. Genghis sent envoys with gifts of gold and silver, fine silks, and rare treasures. His message was simple: let us trade, let us prosper together. But this is where the first cracks appeared. Shah Muhammad saw the Mongols not as equals, but as uncivilized barbarians. To him, Genghis Khan was nothing more than a steppe warlord dressed in stolen silk. Accepting his offer meant lowering the honor of Khwarazm. Pride blinded the Shah. Still, trade began. Caravans moved east and west, filling the markets of Bukhara and Samarkand with goods from China. For a moment it seemed as if peace was possible, but within the Shah's court whispers grew. Advisors and generals sneered at the gifts from Genghis, calling them tributes rather than partnerships. They believed the Mongols were beneath them, a passing storm that could never threaten the grandeur of Khwarazm. This arrogance would set the stage for disaster, because what followed was not just a diplomatic misstep. It was an insult so grave that it would awaken the fury of Genghis Khan, a fury that history still remembers with fear. The Shah's fatal mistake was approaching, and with it the slow unraveling of his mighty empire. A group of Mongol merchants, nearly 500 men, arrived at the Khwarezmian city of Otrar. Their camels were heavy with silk, spices, and treasures from the east. They carried not weapons, but trade goods and letters sealed with the mark of Genghis Khan himself, a sign of friendship and trust. But trust is fragile. The governor of Otrar, a man named Inalchuk, looked upon the caravan with suspicion. To him, these merchants were spies, not traders. Perhaps he feared their growing presence, or perhaps he simply envied their wealth. Whatever the reason, he made a choice that would doom his empire. He seized the caravan. The merchants were accused of treachery, their goods confiscated, their lives cut short in brutal fashion. Some were slaughtered, others tortured, and the rest left to rot in cells. Their screams echoed through the walls of Otrar, a sound that history would not forget. When news of this massacre reached Genghis Khan, he did not rage immediately. Instead, he sent envoys to the Shah himself, demanding justice. He asked only for the governor of Otrar to be punished. It was a reasonable request, one that could have preserved peace. But arrogance is louder than reason. The Shah made his fatal mistake. He not only refused to punish his governor, he executed one of Genghis Khan's ambassadors and humiliated the others, branding their faces with fire before sending them back. In the world of the Mongols, this was not just disrespect. This was an unforgivable insult. Imagine the silence in Genghis Khan's camp when the scarred envoys returned. Their burned faces told a story of betrayal that no words could capture. Around the fire, the Mongol warriors sat in disbelief, their honor wounded as deeply as their Khan's. And in that silence, something darker began to take shape. Vengeance. When the storm broke, it was unlike anything the Khwarazm Empire had ever faced. The Mongol armies moved with terrifying speed. They were not just soldiers, they were a force of nature. Rivers froze under their hooves, deserts became highways for their advance. Cities that had stood for centuries crumbled in days. In Bukhara, the great mosque was filled with trembling citizens praying for mercy. Genghis Khan himself entered the city not as a guest but as a conqueror. Standing before the frightened masses, he declared, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." What followed was horror. Streets ran red with blood. Smoke darkened the sky as entire libraries filled with centuries of knowledge were burned to ash. Survivors were chained, dragged away into slavery, or left wandering amidst ruins. The once proud cities of Khwarazm became graveyards, but the physical destruction was only half the nightmare. The survivors carried scars far deeper than wounds. Mothers whispered to their children of demons on horseback, of shadows that struck without warning. Nightmares spread faster than fire, and even in distant lands people spoke in hushed voices of the Mongols' wrath. The Shah himself fled, haunted by visions of retribution. Each night he heard the hoofbeats of approaching riders. Each shadow in his tent seemed to whisper his doom. The empire that once dreamed of greatness now drowned in paranoia and terror, and yet, the true horror was still to come. The Shah who once ruled proudly from his golden throne was now a fugitive, wandering like a hunted animal. From palace silk to torn rags, from royal feast to scraps of bread, his descent was complete. Driven westward by fear, Shah Muhammad abandoned his people, his soldiers, even his family. He moved from city to city, always one step ahead of the Mongol riders, always looking over his shoulder. Each dawn, the sound of hoofbeats haunted him. Each night, whispers in the dark told him what he already knew. His empire was gone. But the greatest torment was not outside, it was inside. Witnesses described how the once proud Shah began to unravel. His body weakened, his mind broke. He trembled with fever, muttered to himself, and woke screaming from nightmares of fire and steel. Some said he saw faces in the shadows, the scarred Mongol envoys staring at him with burned eyes. Others whispered that he heard the cries of Otrar's merchants, demanding justice from beyond the grave. In desperation, he fled to a lonely island in the Caspian Sea, where he hoped the waters would shield him from the Mongol storm. But there was no escape. His illness worsened. His skin blistered, his body wasted away, and even his closest attendants began to fear him. What happened in those final days remains shrouded in mystery. Some chronicles say he died raving in madness, clawing at the air as if invisible riders circled his bed. Others claim an assassin silenced him, his throat cut so no trace of weakness would shame his bloodline. And then there are darker rumors still, whispers that his own guards buried him alive, sealing his tormented soul in the earth. No official records were kept. His death was deliberately erased, his burial site hidden so that no pilgrim could ever mourn him, no enemy could ever desecrate him. The empire he once commanded had already turned to dust, and his name became a curse among his scattered people. And yet, the silence speaks louder than any record. The way his end was concealed, the way his body disappeared from history, suggests something more, some secret his followers did not want the world to know. Was it shame at his weakness, or fear that his restless spirit would return to haunt them? Whatever the truth, one fact remains undeniable. The insult to Genghis Khan had not only destroyed an empire, it had shattered the very soul of its ruler. His story was not just a fall from power, it was a descent into horror, ending in shadows where history dared not look. And from those shadows, the Mongols rose even stronger, carrying the terror of Khwarazm's fate as a warning to the world. When Genghis Khan unleashed his vengeance, it reshaped the very map of Asia. Cities that had thrived for centuries, Otrar, Bukhara, Samarkand, Nishapur, became little more than smoking ruins. The Silk Road, once a lifeline of trade and culture, ran red with blood and ash. Merchants and travelers who once carried silk and spices now carried tales of horror, of cities turned to deserts, of rivers clogged with corpses, of libraries burned until even the air tasted of smoke. For the Khwarazm Empire itself, there was no recovery. Its armies were shattered, its people scattered, and its wealth stolen or destroyed. Within a few short years, an empire that once believed itself destined to rival Rome and Persia simply ceased to exist. Its memory survived only in fearful whispers, the tale of a nation that mocked the wrong man and paid the ultimate price. But the consequences reached far beyond Khwarazm. The destruction of this empire cleared the path for Mongol expansion into the Middle East and beyond. Persia fell, the Caucasus trembled, and soon even the distant kingdoms of Russia and Europe felt the rumble of Mongol hooves. The fatal mistake of one arrogant Shah had opened the gates of the West to Genghis Khan's armies. Politically, it shattered the balance of power. Where once Khwarazm had acted as a buffer between East and West, now there was only open road for the Mongols. Traders and rulers who once ignored the nomads now bowed in fear, sending tribute to avoid the same fate. Even great dynasties began to wonder, if Khwarazm could vanish, who among them was truly safe? Religiously, too, the consequences were profound. The destruction of cities like Nishapur and Bukhara devastated centers of Islamic learning. Entire schools of thought were lost, libraries burned, scholars slain. For generations, the Islamic world would remember the Mongols not just as conquerors, but as a storm that nearly erased centuries of knowledge. Yet there was another, darker legacy: fear itself. Genghis Khan understood that terror could be a weapon more powerful than any sword. The fate of Khwarazm became a story told across continents, a story designed to break spirits before a single Mongol arrow was fired. Villages surrendered without resistance. Kings opened their gates because they had heard what happened to those who dared defy him. And so, the Shah's arrogance became Genghis Khan's greatest weapon. By mocking him, by humiliating his envoys, Khwarazm had gifted the Mongols not only an empire, but a legend of unstoppable vengeance that would haunt the world for centuries. The fatal mistake of one man destroyed millions of lives, reshaped continents, and carved a scar into history that never truly healed. Travelers crossing the ruins of once great cities speak of silence heavier than stone. Beneath layers of sand lie bones that once marched proudly under banners of gold. The wind whispers across abandoned walls, carrying with it the memory of screams long silenced. No monuments honor Shah Muhammad. No shrine marks his grave. His name is not spoken with reverence but with shame. He is remembered not as a builder of empires, but as the man whose arrogance condemned his people to annihilation. His empire died not in battle but in humiliation, erased by a single fatal mistake, and yet, questions remain. Where was he truly buried? Did he die of fever and madness, or was he silenced by his own men? Were the nightmares that haunted him born of guilt, or of something darker, something no historian dares to write? His end was shrouded in secrecy, his records erased, as if his very existence was meant to vanish along with his empire. But history does not forget. The destruction of Khwarazm became more than a tale of conquest. It became a warning, a whisper carried across centuries, reminding rulers and kings of what happens when pride blinds reason, when arrogance defies the unstoppable. Stand too tall, and the storm will cut you down. Mock the wrong man and your people may vanish with you. To this day, the fate of the Khwarazm Empire remains one of the darkest shadows of history, not because of the power they lost, but because of how completely they were erased. A mighty kingdom gone, its ruler lost to mystery, its people scattered like dust in the wind. And perhaps that is the greatest terror of all, that entire civilizations can vanish, swallowed by silence, leaving behind nothing but questions. When the night is quiet and the wind carries strange whispers, some say it is the voice of the Shah himself, still running, still hiding, still haunted by the mistake that destroyed everything he ever ruled. And so the story ends not with victory but with silence. An empire that once stretched across deserts and mountains, erased by one mistake. One insult that turned the most feared conqueror on earth into their executioner. The tale of Shah Muhammad is more than history. It is a lesson carved in blood and ash. Pride blinded him, arrogance destroyed him, and fear consumed him until his last breath. His empire's memory survives only as a warning, that no power, no wealth, no crown is strong enough to withstand the storm of fate when you awaken it. But what do you think? Was the Shah simply a victim of circumstance? Or did his arrogance seal his doom from the very beginning? Do you believe the truth of his death was erased out of shame? Or was it hidden to conceal a darker secret? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you wish to uncover more hidden truths, more empires lost to shadows, then join me again, because history still holds many secrets waiting to be revealed.